The 7 behaviors you should never tolerate from anyone. Most people don't lose themselves in one big moment. They lose themselves drip by tolerating the wrong behavior from the wrong people for far too long. That's the real conflict, isn't it? You don't get destroyed by strangers. You get destroyed by the people you keep giving one more chance. And before you know it, your boundaries look like a broken fence held together by optimism and stubborn denial. You tell yourself you're being patient, mature, understanding, but deep in your stomach, right where the truth always hides, you know exactly what's going on. You're tolerating what you should have confronted. Stoicism would call this the slow corruption of the inner citadel. Your inner fortress, the thing meant to protect your mind and spirit, doesn't collapse because of external attacks. It collapses because you keep opening the gate for people who don't even wipe their feet before walking in. Let's be honest. If someone walked into your house with muddy shoes, dripping chaos everywhere, you'd stop them at the door. But when they walk into your life with muddy behavior, suddenly you want to give them time, understand their childhood, or hope they'll change. This is the madness Stoicism tries to cure. And here's where the humor comes in. If the average person used even half the energy they spent tolerating nonsense on actually living, we'd all be philosophers by lunchtime. The title of this video doesn't lie. There are behaviors you should never tolerate, not because you're dramatic, not because you're sensitive, but because your dignity and peace are not group projects. You don't become stronger by carrying what should have been put down. You don't become wiser by ignoring what your intuition has been screaming for months. Stoicism isn't about being calm while people walk all over you. It's about having enough self-respect to say, no, this ends here. And to understand why these behaviors are so destructive, we start with a story. Stoic, sharp, and painfully relevant. 1. Disrespect that erodes the inner fortress. There is a moment recorded in Stoic tradition where a man burst into Epictetus's space complaining that people kept stepping over him. He felt unheard, undervalued, almost invisible. He expected sympathy, maybe a bit of philosophical comfort. But Epictetus, in the most stoic way possible, looked at him and said something that sliced straight to the bone. "You allow it." The man stood there stunned, probably blinking like he had just been slapped by wisdom itself. But Epictetus didn't stop. He explained that every act of tolerated disrespect is a lesson you accidentally teach others. When you let someone interrupt you without correction, you teach them your voice doesn't matter. When you accept someone's cold tone as just how they are, you teach them they don't need to treat you with warmth. When you stay silent about your boundaries, you teach them you don't have any. That hit me harder than I expected because I saw myself in that man, especially during a period in my life when I tolerated disrespect disguised as normal conversation. I was speaking to someone who had a calm voice but a sharp attitude. You know the type. Their sentences felt like they were filed down with sandpaper, subtle enough to dismiss, painful enough to notice. We were sitting outside. The air smelled faintly of brewed coffee and damp soil, and they kept cutting across my words like I was merely background noise. I walked away feeling smaller, not humiliated, not insulted, just reduced. That quiet kind of disrespect is the most dangerous because it convinces you that it's not a big deal. But Stoicism doesn't care about theatrics. It cares about truth. And the truth is this: any behavior that diminishes your spirit is a behavior you must not tolerate. Stoicism teaches that you protect your inner fortress not by building walls, but by enforcing standards. You cannot control anyone else's character, tone, or level of maturity, but you absolutely control who you allow to sit at your table. If someone's presence repeatedly breaks your peace, dulls your confidence, pricks at your value, or makes you feel like a lesser version of yourself, the Stoics would argue that the disrespect didn't start with them. It started with your silence. 2. Manipulation wrapped in good intentions. Some behaviors don't walk into your life loudly. They don't shout. They don't threaten. They don't slam doors or break things. Instead, they enter quietly, like they're doing you a favor. That's why manipulation is so dangerous. It pretends to be kindness. Stoicism teaches that your freedom begins the moment you stop letting other people steer your emotions. But manipulation makes that almost impossible because it tricks you into believing that someone else's happiness is your responsibility. And once you accept that lie, they own you. I once dealt with someone who had perfected the art of gentle control. They spoke softly, always in a warm tone, almost like they were soothing you while they tightened the leash. Their hair was always neatly pulled back, their eyes bright, too bright sometimes, like they were watching your reactions more than your words. And whenever I said no, their attitude didn't turn angry, it turned disappointed. And disappointment can be more controlling than anger. If I created space, they became distant. If I disagreed, they acted hurt. If I set a boundary, they suddenly needed to think about things. Everything in their behavior was designed to make me feel guilty for wanting independence. That's when I understood something the Stoics have been shouting for centuries. Not every smile is sincere, and not every warm gesture is clean. Stoicism warns about people who pull on your emotions like strings, because manipulation doesn't force you to act. It makes you want to act out of pressure, guilt, or fear of upsetting someone. And once that pattern forms, you no longer make choices based on reason or values. You make them based on someone else's reactions. The worst part? Manipulation often feels polite. It feels thoughtful. It feels supportive. Until you realize you haven't made an honest decision in months. A manipulator will never say, "Do what I want." They'll say, "Do what makes you happy," while giving you that subtle look that says, "Don't disappoint me." And if you're not paying attention, you'll start shaping your life around their comfort instead of your own growth. Stoicism demands self-governance. You cannot claim to control your mind when someone else has their hands on the steering wheel. You cannot develop clarity when someone else fogs your thinking with guilt. You cannot live freely while walking on eggshells for a person who is perfectly stable when you give them what they want and suddenly fragile when you don't. Here's the truth. A person who loves you will not punish you emotionally for having boundaries. A person with integrity will not reward you with warmth only when you comply. A person with character does not twist your kindness into an obligation. And you must never tolerate behavior that makes you question your freedom to say no. Manipulation is not love. It is not care. It is not loyalty. It is control wearing a friendly mask. And the moment you feel that mask tightening, Stoicism gives you the simplest instruction in the world. Walk away before your mind stops belonging to you. 3. Constant inconsistency that makes you doubt reality. If there's one behavior the Stoics would never entertain for even 5 minutes, it's inconsistency. Not normal human imperfection. Everyone has off days. I'm talking about the kind of inconsistency that turns your emotional world into a guessing game. One day someone is warm, open, laughing with you like you matter. The next day, they're cold, distant, and barely able to meet your eyes. Not because anything changed, simply because they feel like switching. This kind of on and off behavior is more damaging than people realize. Stoicism calls this living at the mercy of another's mood. When someone's behavior swings without explanation, they force you into a state of constant adjustment. You start modifying your tone, your words, even your energy to avoid triggering the next shift. Nothing destroys your peace faster. The Stoics believed your inner life should be stable, even if the world is chaotic, But it's impossible to build inner stability when someone else's inconsistency becomes the weather of your emotions. You find yourself waking up and mentally checking, which version of them am I getting today? And that question alone is already a sign you're tolerating too much. People who are chronically inconsistent rarely take responsibility for the confusion they create. They'll tell you that you're overreacting, or that they're just busy, or that you're reading too much into things. Meanwhile, their behavior continues to yo-yo, and your emotional world becomes the rope. Stoicism teaches that clarity is a form of virtue. Inconsistency destroys clarity. It forces you into survival mode, always watching for small signs, small changes, small hints that their mood has shifted again. What makes this behavior dangerous is how subtle it is. They're not insulting you. They're not manipulating you openly. They're not shouting. They're simply unpredictable enough to keep you unbalanced. And here's the quiet truth. When someone cannot offer emotional consistency, you end up doing all the emotional labor for the relationship. You become the stabilizer, the one making sense of their confusion, the one smoothing the edges. Meanwhile, they live freely, unburdened by the weight they place on you. A Stoic would never tolerate this, because inconsistency steals something irreplaceable, your sense of reality. You start second-guessing yourself. You start questioning your intuition. You start wondering whether you're too sensitive when the truth is simple. You're reacting to an unstable environment. You deserve relationships that feel grounded, not like walking on moving floors. You deserve people who show up with the same character on good days and bad ones. Not perfection, not robotic predictability, just emotional reliability. Anyone who forces you to question what version of them you will meet today is asking you to sacrifice your peace for their chaos. And that is something you must never tolerate, not if you want to protect your mind, your joy, and your inner stability. 4. People who make everything about themselves. There's a special kind of person who treats conversations like a sport, the sport of dragging everything back to themselves. You tell them you're exhausted and need rest, and somehow they end up giving a full TED Talk on how they barely slept last night. You mention you had a bad week. Suddenly they're listing every tragic event since 1996 that happened to them, as if there's a competition you didn't know you signed up for. This behavior might seem harmless at first, but it slowly drains you. You start noticing that your feelings get dismissed, your stories get cut short, and your emotional experiences only exist to give them a jumping-off point for their own monologue. It's exhausting because the relationship becomes one-sided. They take, you give, and the cycle repeats. People who constantly center themselves show you something important. They don't yet have the capacity to consider someone else's world. And if you're not careful, you end up shrinking yourself so they can keep occupying the whole room. You deserve relationships where your thoughts don't get hijacked the moment they leave your mouth. A healthy connection is a two-way street, not a radio station where only one person broadcasts and the rest of us just listen. The moment you find yourself feeling invisible, paused, or emotionally sidelined every time you try to share something real, it's a sign you're tolerating too much. You can love people without allowing them to swallow your voice. 5. People who constantly break promises. Nothing erodes trust and respect faster than someone who says one thing and does another. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be small. I'll call you tomorrow. That never happens. A project deadline missed without a word, plans cancelled last minute with flimsy excuses. Each broken promise is a tiny crack in the foundation of reliability, and once that foundation is shaky, everything built on it, your trust, your patience, your willingness to give them the benefit of the doubt, crumbles. The funny, almost absurd part is how some people act like it's normal. They'll smile and shrug, as if forgetting or changing plans is an acceptable life strategy, and they look at you like you're overreacting for expecting basic integrity. And here's the Stoic truth. When you tolerate this behavior, you're teaching them it's okay to disregard your time, your effort, and your expectations. You're complicit in your own frustration. Stoicism teaches that character is revealed through action, not words. And when someone consistently fails to follow through, they are revealing exactly who they are, not who you hope them to be, not who they claim to be, who they actually are. Allowing repeated broken promises signals to yourself and to them that your boundaries are optional, and that's a lesson no Stoic would ever endorse. When you notice the pattern, the choice is simple. Stop tolerating it. Set clear expectations. Enforce consequences. Let them face the natural result of their own unreliability. Because nothing teaches responsibility better than knowing that their actions have real impact on you and that you won't endlessly absorb the fallout. 6. People who constantly criticize without constructive intent. Some people criticize as if it's a sport. Their words sting, not because they are insightful, but because they're careless, mean, or designed to elevate themselves at your expense. They don't offer guidance, they don't suggest solutions, and they certainly don't help you grow. They simply remind you of your flaws in a way that makes you doubt your own worth. At first, you might laugh it off. Stoicism teaches resilience, after all, but repeated exposure wears you down. You start second-guessing yourself, questioning your choices, and even censoring your own thoughts to avoid the inevitable critique. And all the while, the critic acts as if this behavior is normal, even necessary, like they are performing a public service by pointing out your mistakes. The Stoics valued truth, but they valued intention even more. Criticism without constructive intent is selfish. It isn't about helping you improve, it's about satisfying the critic's need to dominate, belittle, or control. Allowing this behavior silently teaches them that your mind and confidence are open game, that your spirit can be chipped at leisure. The key is recognizing the difference. A true critique, one grounded in reason and care, should enlighten, not diminish. When someone repeatedly offers only judgment, sarcasm, or belittlement, you're not just tolerating unpleasantness, you're tolerating theft of your self-respect. And no Stoic ever accepted such theft silently. 7. People who refuse to take responsibility. The last behavior you should never tolerate is the chronic refusal to take responsibility. These are the people who always have an excuse ready, who blame circumstances, other people, or even you for their mistakes. Their errors are never theirs. They belong to the world, to luck, to timing. And every time you excuse them, you are silently accepting that your life is partially run by someone else's unwillingness to own their actions. Stoicism teaches that virtue is in control over yourself and your choices. When you interact with someone who constantly denies responsibility, you are forced to carry the weight of their negligence, confusion, or recklessness. Their lack of accountability seeps into your world. Their tasks become yours. Their failures ripple into your plans, and their energy drains yours. You might even find yourself apologizing for something you never did, simply because they cannot face the consequences of their own behavior. You might think patience or empathy will fix them. It won't. Stoicism is brutally clear. You can control yourself. You cannot control others. And when someone refuses to own their life, they are offering you chaos dressed as social interaction. Tolerating it doesn't make you kind. It makes you complicit in a slow erosion of your own boundaries, your time, and your peace. The Stoic solution is simple. Enforce clear boundaries. Do not carry their responsibilities. Do not justify their excuses. You cannot make them mature, but you can refuse to let their immaturity dominate your life. Walking away from habitual irresponsibility is not abandonment. It is self-preservation, clarity, and respect for your own virtue. Conclusion. These 7 behaviors, the subtle erosion of peace, manipulation, inconsistency, self-centeredness, broken promises, relentless criticism, and refusal to take responsibility, are more than irritations. They are threats to the mind, the soul, and the Stoic ideal of a life well governed by reason and virtue. Tolerating them is like letting termites live in the foundation of your house. At first, it seems harmless, almost invisible, but over time, the damage is real, and when the collapse comes, it will not be sudden. It will be inevitable. Stoicism does not demand you harden your heart. It does not demand isolation. It demands clarity. It demands vigilance. It demands the courage to say, I will not allow behaviors that destroy my peace and dilute my dignity. Your life is yours. Your mind is yours. Your virtue is yours. And if someone continually undermines these, Stoicism teaches you the simplest, strongest response. Do not tolerate it. Withdraw your energy. Withdraw your attention. Withdraw your permission for them to harm what you cannot afford to lose. Because at the end of the day, the most stoic act of all is not enduring nonsense with a forced smile. It is protecting your life, your mind, and your integrity from the behaviors that are unworthy of you.